Dear Mama, you have so many questions, but not enough answers. You wish you didn't have to ask, and that's why I'm writing you this letter. You're not alone, you're not crazy, and I hope this helps. I see you because I am you. Sincerely, Mama. Hey, Mama, hey. You are tuned in to Sincerely Mama podcast, where we've created a safe space for us to share all things motherhood. No magical motherhood, but realistic motherhood. I'm your host, Jackie Bobbitt, millennial mom, entrepreneur, and purpose coach. Today we have Raphael and Tiara Peters sharing their experience with miscarriage. Although this is a mom podcast, today we are excited to have a male's perspective, a dad's perspective on how they went through the experience of miscarriage. Stick around.
Well, she's done the podcast before, so you might know her. But I'm her husband, Raph Peters. And yeah, we've been married for 7 years. 7 years, 3 kids, too, by the way.
So today we are talking about miscarriage. Let's slow it down and let's walk our guests through what that looked like for you. So tell me how it was finding out you guys are pregnant. So you get the positive. Tell me your thoughts initially.
Well, as Raph mentioned, we have 3 children already, and we always hoped for a big family. Despite the craziness of parenthood, how demanding it is, we always hope to have 4 children. So after getting through postpartum with the twins, we were still kind of on the fence and ultimately decided that we did still want to grow our family if God would bless us. So we tried for a couple of months, and we were extremely excited and thrilled when we got that positive test, letting us know that we would be having that big family that we hoped for. So we were really grateful for the news of pregnancy again.
Raph?
Oh, so me. I'm sorry. Anyways, yeah, I think it was exciting news for sure, because it was something that we wanted, and I'm trying to remember what it was like each time we found out about like Khalil, then when we found out about the twins. It was different. It was like, yeah, we were expecting this with the twins. We weren't necessarily
we
expecting to be 2.
Well, and we were expecting it, but we had been trying for like a year with the twins. So our hopes weren't extremely high with the twin pregnancy because we've been trying for some time and not getting pregnant. So, and Khalil was our surprise baby. So yeah, this one was different because this was planned and it was quick. That's what you'd say.
And you spoke for me. That's great.
Okay, so you get the positive, you're excited. It was quicker than you expected. Walk us through how you found out about the miscarriage. What happened? What led you guys to that moment?
Well, we were about 11 weeks along when we found out I miscarried. It was a Sunday morning. We were getting ready for church.
I was at church already.
Yeah, Raph was at church already. And I was attempting to plug in an appliance, and I got a little electric shock from touching the Pong. So initially, I started to just carry on how I typically would on a Sunday morning. But then I remembered that I was pregnant, and I was like, do I have reason to be concerned about the baby? I didn't feel like I felt fine otherwise, but ultimately I decided to go to the doctor and check on the baby. So I called my midwife. She said, this shouldn't be an issue, but for your own comfort, you can go get an ultrasound today and check on the baby. So Raph came home from church. I went to a hospital that it's not actually my hospital, but the hospital that the midwife recommended I go to for an ultrasound. And I laid on the table. The ultrasound tech did a regular ultrasound, and then she did a transvaginal ultrasound. And when I went back into the room, the doctor came in and told me that my baby had no heartbeat. And she also shared that it was likely that the baby miscarried maybe a couple of weeks before, because I was measuring 10 weeks pregnant, and I was going on 12 weeks. I was about to meet that 12-week mark that most moms meet and feel extreme, relief. Like, you kind of let out that sigh, like, okay, I'm in the clear, because we know that first trimester is more risky for a miscarriage. So we were almost there, and I was heartbroken when she told me that there was no heartbeat.
Were you all together and at the appointment?
No, Raph stayed home with the kids, so I was alone, and had been texting and communicating with some of our church family and said, hey, I'm at the doctor's office, prior to getting that news. So when everyone didn't hear from me, there was definitely some concern, and Raph hadn't heard from me. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it was weird because she was updating me the whole time, telling me how long it was taking to do some of the tests and stuff like that. And I was like, okay. Then she stopped updating me, and then you start thinking the worst.
Right.
When she came home, all of a sudden I just, hear her crying and saying, like, I can't remember what she was saying, but it was like you were repeating the same thing. I was like, didn't know what to do in that moment. And then all the emotions come with it. But,
So tell us about those emotions. You have to have this moment where you're waiting until Tierra comes home. So Tierra is likely dealing with this on the ride home. She comes in the door, bursts into tears. What's your initial reaction? Because this is one different, because we don't always get to hear a dad's perspective. And so we really want to hone in on both perspectives. We want to hear the family perspective. So Tierra, share what your initial feelings were coming into the house, and then Raph, you share what your initial feelings were once you saw how Tierra responded. And this is still, she hadn't shared what happened, right?
Yeah, so when she got home, she just started crying, and it was like initial shock. But
yeah, I would say I was definitely feeling shocked. I think that, naturally as humans, we always think the worst to prepare ourselves for the worst. But I realized in that moment that, worrying about my pregnancy still did not prepare me for the possibility of actually losing our baby. So I was shocked, and as I mentioned, I was heartbroken, and I felt confused, because what I was told is that I had a missed miscarriage. So that's when you miscarry, but your body hasn't realized that you've miscarried yet. So it's almost as if because you still think that you're pregnant, your body is still holding on to the pregnancy. So, and then they told me that I had to essentially wait for the baby to pass from my body. So I was feeling confused, heavy, disappointed. What about you?
yeah, I think when you initially shared, initial shock, just still trying to like register, okay, she said she lost the baby. And it just didn't naturally hit me right away. And then after the initial shock, it was, oh, I got to go into husband, father mode. and I got to make sure she's good and we're good and somebody's strong. And so it was like, okay, let me try to be strong. And then it really hit me that we lost our child. And so I remember I left. I was like, I have to show this image of strength and let me make sure my family doesn't see. So I went in the garage and was just wailing and just like internalizing a lot of it. And I think a lot of it, I felt like it was my fault. It's like, man, well, if I just would have been more present in the home, and you just the list of the reasons why, the Lord may have allowed this to happen because of something that I did. And I just remember being so angry at God. And then also just kind of like, I felt embarrassed in some ways. Like, man, like, how could I allow this to, this is my fault. So how could, I could do something to cause this. And then there's just a whole lot of other emotions that came from like, dang, this is on me, and so I spent a lot of that afternoon not being able to be consoled. Like I remember just trying to get it together. And I was like, man, my family can't see me this way. But yeah, that was kind of the initial emotions and feelings that came once I found out about it.
Right. So tell me about the grieving process, which we know that is a process. So how did you guys start that process? So you both felt shocked. How did you begin to grieve the loss of your baby?
I think that it was a one day at a time thing for us. My midwives did recommend some resources, some local resources for couples who've experienced miscarriage or other loss, infant loss. So I looked into some of those resources, but really it was just something. It was something that had to happen, as each day unfolded, especially because I was waiting for my body to release our baby. And I couldn't start grieving until the miscarriage actually happened. And I was, going back and forth with the midwives about, what to expect and what would be next steps if my body didn't start to miscarry on its own. We talked about options, medication, and then I found myself also in that deep rabbit hole dive online of like, what do other people do when they have miscarriages, and would I have to have surgery? So, between processing that information about what is this going to feel like, what do I expect, and then also continuing to parent our very small children and help them to understand why the baby in mommy's belly is gone. I don't feel like I was able to fully, sit with what had happened. And I tried to. I think for me, I tried to, just to do what we always did. I think it was the next week that we went back to church, because I was like, there's nothing to be done. Like it just is what it is, and life is moving on. So I think I just tried to move on. And like I said, life didn't slow down. So I kept going. But I do remember feeling very angry at my body for delaying that process. I wanted to hurry up and get through it.
How long did it take?
It took about 2 weeks. No. Well, it was I waited a week, and then the next week I started. I think I started Cytotec. I started a medication to help, and then I think halfway through the week, I slowly started to have cramps, and so I think maybe about 2 weeks overall.
So, Raf, did that process, the grieving process, did that look different for you?
Yeah, I think I agree with her. Like life just kept going, so it's kind of like just go with it as if nothing happened. So the initial like grieving process is just kind of like this trying to live in this fantasy world, like you didn't just lose a baby. And so I remember I started getting to work. Like we had just moved into this house, so there's a bunch of different uh, tasks and stuff that I was trying to complete. Remember, I cleaned out the garage. I was putting up pictures. I was just trying to distract myself from really even thinking about it. And so I feel like initially it was like, okay, like I'm gonna act like this didn't happen. And then I think around the same time, like when we went to church, and then people start asking the questions, or no, I took that back.
Just looking at you with pity and or not saying anything. There's a weird, I think, between there's a weird space when you miscarry, because on one hand people want to let you know that they love you and that they're sorry for your loss, but on the other hand people don't want to trigger you, so they try to, be at ease or normal, if you will, and both can be too much. Actually, it can be too much when people are, I'm so sorry, like, they're sometimes the sorrow can be triggering, but also sometimes the calm or the trying to be normal, that can be triggering. I think both of them were hard.
Yeah, I was gonna say it actually started a little earlier than us going to church, because people were coming, sending meals and stuff like that. And there were a couple of people who really didn't know how to kind of navigate that water. And we weren't really that close to that family. And I just remember, having to process, because they was just like here and asking questions. I'm like, man, I don't want to talk about it right now. But having to be confronted with that because of their presence was something that kind of started the process in some ways, I think. But yeah, initially, definitely it was, let me act like this, didn't even happen. And I did that really good. I got a lot of work done at the house.
You did
during that time. And me working hard made me realize, like, man, like I'm really trying not to confront these emotions and feelings that I have. So
that's a good point. So with both of you attempting to make things seem like they were normal, at what point did you pivot? At what point did you say, okay, this is real, let me address it? Or did that ever happen?
I think for me, it was the second week when some of our church family started putting together a meal train for us. And I remember giving some pushback. I'm okay. Like I'm functioning fine. Like I'm still up and about. You guys don't have to do that. And one of our friends telling me, let us be your hands and feet while you sit with this. And I think that's when I finally realized that that something devastating had happened. I mean, I knew that, but I think that's when I allowed myself to really acknowledge that and really feel that. And I still think that, it still came in waves for sure. But I think the next week is when I finally had to confront what happened, as you said, right?
Yeah, I think for me, there was two conversations that I had with two men, Peyton Simpson and Jeffrey Stafford, who had both had, miscarriages. And I think talking to them, really, like, the pivot happened when I realized as a man, I can have these real emotions of hurt and sadness and loss and like be weak in this moment. And talking to them really allowed me to, like, okay, like, and I can not only be weak in private, but I can be weak in front of other people, like my family. I kind of think that was the first pivot, which kind of was around the same time too. Mm-hmm. So good conversations for sure.
Absolutely. So now it's been how long since then, since the miscarriage happened?
Almost
Mm,
2 years.
it's been a year and like 4 months, I think.
Okay, so what's been the toughest part this far?
I think um I think that I don't want to make light of our situation or downplay our loss because we definitely, both grieve the baby that we lost. But I think that on one hand, we already have three small children and, the demands of caring for three small children fills up a lot of our time. So I think that on one hand, I'm not saying it's not been difficult, but I think that it's I feel like it's maybe has been more easy for us than some couples who have miscarried before having any children or miscarried their first pregnancy. But to answer your question, I think that dates are hard. Our baby's birthday would have been June 13th, or estimated due date was June 13th. So I think that when that day comes around, or last year when that day came around, it's when I finally realized we would have had a baby. And then this past Thanksgiving, when it passed, that was, the week that we lost our baby the year before. So I think that days, are markers in my mind of what could have been, and that's been difficult for me. And also, like in small moments when we're like sitting at the dinner table, we have 6 chairs at our table, and there's one chair that's not used. Sometimes we look at that chair and we say, somebody's missing.
Yeah. I think the hardest thing for me is seeing other people um, have kids, and it's just always hard. Like after the miscarriage, we had two people, well, one person who a couple that got pregnant and loved them and even loved the baby, sweet baby. But it's just like, man, like hardest part is knowing like we don't have a child. And then seeing other people have children, it's like, man, that's hard. Like I can't. I think I usually have the hardest time when I see that. Like I want to be happy for
Right,
couples, and I am for the most part, but it's always like, dang, like
right.
our child's coming. And what I really want the most, like I think it's like if I could have anything, I would want that child. Um, so like, man, we could try again, but the other child will never replace the child that we had. So
This was part one of Raf and Tiara's experience with miscarriage. Join us next week for part two. Thank you so much for joining us. If you found this episode helpful, do me a favor and share it with another mama. Subscribe to this podcast and leave us a 5-star review. Also, connect with us on all social media platforms at Sincerely Mama Podcast. Remember, you're the best mama for your children. We'll see you next time. Sincerely Mama.